So this one I actually don't disagree with too much at the beginning. I think that's fairly well said for the most part. I do believe, and I've said it many times, that I believe he is in an echo chamber. I think people are absolutely telling him what he needs to hear all the time, just to keep it going. But then again, the entire conversation around him during the stream was he is starting off all conversations with his race at the beginning, and it's tiring. It's coming from someone who, again, is not white, which most people don't know, obviously, for obvious reasons. But it's very tiring to see people of color, people who, I mean, why let that victim mindset set in? I don't know, but that's where the frustration comes from, right? So
yeah,
I get through it by making jokes, because I make jokes about everything, right? Ryan tends to go the more edgy route. I tend to go the more loud and brash route. But ultimately, you know, that's where we come from. To pass that off, though, as something to be condemned, again, is where I kind of got confused from your overall post. I felt very, very kind of sidelined by it, because not that I think you're on anybody's side. I think you're right down the middle for the most part.
And that's pretty accurate. I lean right for sure, but I definitely, as a Catholic, have feet in both, across that line for sure from time to time, depending on the subject and, what specific thing. Because while it is a very tribal conversation that happens online, there is a lot of nuance that I think if people are willing to dive into that nuance and push back and forth like we're having right now, I think I'm having a really good time with this conversation. But that nuance is important.
Paid well for it too. So
well, good, dude. That doesn't bother me. It's like
it did, though. It did.
No, it did not. And it did not. And you say that it did, but that would be a lie right there, because it didn't bother me. It's a part of the conversation about attention and the game that's being played.
I believe that it did.
That's fine. That would be a fair statement. You're welcome to believe that.
There you go. So the hateful racist echo chambers. Do you believe that we overall are, I guess, well, actually you kind of answered that, right? Because you said from the 30-second clip, you believe us, to be racist, right? Or
no,
at least
I didn't say I believe y'all to be racist. I believe that what was communicated by using the term spear checker as a racist term. I didn't go, and I don't believe, and if I did, I will correct it, but I don't believe I'm sitting here saying these guys are racist. I think somebody said that y'all were awful, and I believe I replied, I was like, I can't prescribe those emotions and those feelings to what was said in the clip. So there should not be anything of me if I mistype something and it came off to me saying that you are racist, like, oh, the Hypnocast is racist. No, I am not saying that. And I wouldn't even think I'm getting close to saying that. But in the terms of the clip itself that was shared, I was like, that is a good example of that. That is a racist phrase to use outside of the context of if he was telling a joke. And I believe I was even, again, like, this is all, it all happens in different replies. But I was like, if he's telling a joke, it's like, I'm not seeing the joke, but that's, again, the clip's 5 seconds.
Right. Okay. So at least we're only racist for 30 seconds then, I guess. Or like,
no, you're not only racist for 30 seconds or 5 hours. It's like, I'm not prescribing the label racist to you or anybody on that panel, but I am talking about the context of what,
because if you think what was said was racist, then you got to apply it to someone. You
not
can't
necessarily.
Just say that
people
was
can
racist
say,
and then
right.
just keep it out in the air for everybody to grab.
Right. So is a comedian racist for saying something that could be perceived as racist? No. Like, again, that's all in the context of what is being communicated and talked about in that clip. I'm still not going and labeling any individual as that. I'm talking about the word, especially when it's phrased around the concept of spear chucker, which is a derogatory term for Black people.
But if you say that a word is racist, then somebody had to say that word.
Right. Somebody can say something racist that doesn't change their heart. That doesn't, like, racism is the idea that your race is better than another, right? And so people can say mean and hurtful things, and and this is probably a failure of the English language, we use the word racist to apply to the words that people are saying, but there is still a disconnect. You can be somebody who either through ignorance or you just didn't know, or maybe you just like saying shit and throwing it out there online, but your heart, we can't know that. And I can't, that's why I'm like, I can't label anybody with that phrase because I don't know anybody's heart. It would be weird that, and I don't understand racism, full stop, because at the end of the day, it's like we all bleed red. We're all like human freaking beings, right?
Right.
And that's where, that's where I usually come from. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna ask. So then, is the saying still racist if a black person says it?
Saying a spear chucker?
Yeah.
I would bet that it could be. There's a context in which that could be applied with that label.
If spear chucker
I'm just saying,
is
like,
a derogatory term
right.
against black people, and that's racist. It's a racist term, right? We're not calling anybody racist. We're just talking about the term. If a black person says that term, is it racist? Because there are currently black people in the chat right now using that term.
They're welcome to use the term. But
is it still racist? That's my question.
I don't honestly. It's a fair question. I don't know. I'm not being the person who's kind of like perceiving it. So it's like, all right, like however they want to choose to perceive it. Like you can call me anything under the sun. I wouldn't prescribe anything like that would be racist because for me, like you can't offend me. It just doesn't ever happen.
But I'm not asking about you. I'm asking about is the term itself racist if a black person were to say it right now on stream?
I wouldn't think it would be in that case if somebody is saying that.
Why was it racist when Ryan Roger Athe said it?
Well, because it's from somebody of a different race. Like that is where that comes in.
What does that mean? Like you can still be racist against your own race. There are people that are self-racist against their own race. If a term is racist, right? If I called another Hispanic a spick right now, am I being racist?
I don't think so. I don't think so in that context.
But if a white person calls me a spick, are they racist?
No, not necessarily. Again,
so why is it racism when he called Abu Bakr Salim a spear chucker?
Because it's fucking mean.
So is calling someone a spick?
Yeah.
So where does racism come into play?
I mean, if you can't see the clear divide and how it functions just within the human language, I don't have an answer that you're going to be satisfied with. It is going down into the point of intent. Are you intending to be this?
But you're talking about intent without actually looking for the intent because you only saw a Twitter post, which I understand, perfectly fine. But there is intent out there. We're all clearly laughing. We're laughing it off because we made jokes about everybody. Well before Abu Bakr Salim even became a topic of Saturday Night Hypnosis, we were making jokes about Unknown Nine Awakening, Indian jokes, obviously, all that shit. We were doing it all the time. Right. So nobody claimed racism for that. Nobody said, oh, that's racist. But the moment spear chucker was thrown at Abu Bakr Salim, suddenly it's racist. My conversation is if the term itself is racist.
Yeah.
Right. Why is it not racist if a black person says it?
It's, I guess, really depending on, are you intending it to be hateful and mean? Like, are you intending to
comes into play? But you didn't go for the context. You only looked at the tweet.
Yeah, that's what was fed. Okay. And if you want to say that everybody has this massive amount of responsibility to go and watch all kinds of content, you're welcome to believe that.
No,
that's just not the reality.
When you openly condemn something, which again, you didn't use the words racist in the tweet, which is fine, but you said it here on the stream. The term is racist. Spear chucker. That's the one. That's the one that got everybody upset, right? The spear chucker.
Yeah.
So if context suddenly matters, why was context not applied in this scenario for you to want to quote tweet and condemn it? You didn't need the context. You had all the 30 seconds of context you needed to decide that it was racism in your mind because you didn't see the joke. But my thing is, if it's the term that's racist, then does it suddenly not become racist if a black person says it right now on stream?
I wouldn't think so unless they're actively targeting another black person and, and with hate and malice in their heart. If you can tell me that they're doing that, then I could say, yeah, in that context, probably. But most likely, I have no idea.
So why'd you have an idea with this one?
Because this is a term from, especially a white guy, historical context, especially in the United States. You have the black community historically been decimated in this country, going from the highest marriage rate population in this country to one of the lowest all throughout the, policy driven nature of it. It is frustrating. I think, at the end of the day, it's important to sit down and sit here and try and work it out and try and discuss these things. So, yeah, I think essentially if any white guy wants to call that, if a black guy wants to call me a cracker, if they have hate and malice in their heart for doing so, then yeah, that would be a racist term, because that is in and of itself like something to be said. But if white people want to call each other crackers all the time, that's perfectly fine. This seems to be more of just a natural way that we have kind of society, and how we and choose to communicate, in a, whether we want to be respectful, whether we want to be antagonistic. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just language.
If it's just language, why condemn it so openly like that?
Because in terms, well, again, I've answered this question, but this goes back to, what is the overall stated goal for Gamergate 2.0? Is it to...
But we weren't talking about Gamergate 2.0 at that situation. We were talking about Abu Bakr Salim.
Right, which his game came out.
We don't have a banner that says we are Gamergate 2.0. We don't have a banner that says that. Yeah, so what the fuck does that have to do with anything?
Well, it has, like, in terms of the context of this year, his game promoted, they had the SBI, they, like all of that stuff, the kind of the, what is it? The empathy statement in terms of how he's, marketing his game, whether, that is real or not, that goes back to kind of point number one. But it's still the context of Gamergate. Whether your guys are talking about it, that is what we're talking about. That's what other people are talking about in terms of quoting it. This is essentially where, like you said, somebody said, like, these your leaders or something like that. And that is because you, whether you want it or not, whether you enjoy it or not, or whether you ask for it or not, are a representation of one side of this coin. And that in and of itself deserves, like, I would say what I'm writing here is a level of respect, willing to go out, talk about it, giving my perspective on it, and then coming on the show and talking to you about it in an open and honest way.
Do you think it's okay for a white person to determine what is racist for a person of color?
I don't know really how to answer that. It's never anything I've ever given a lot of thought. So, like, are you saying where, like, we'll just use me in this case, where I'm going and then telling somebody else that what is happening to them is racism?
In a sense, right? So you determined that spear chucker was a term because systematic, whatever, about black people that can't seem to...
It's a known term. It's a known thing to irritate. It's like, the same thing with, like, if someone was
there's known systems that are in place to keep black people down in the country right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Planned Parenthood, you have that as one. You have the welfare system.
Those policies?
The Democrats.
Yeah, it's quite unfortunate.
Oh, it is. And it really has decimated the population, because it's also the war on drugs. That's also, I think, another Democratic thing that came in. And those are policies that have systematically just, fundamentally taken out the legs of the family unit within their communities. And it has had devastating effects. And it's really unfortunate. And I'm not sitting here trying to sit here and say I've got some white savior complex, but I'm just sitting here saying, like, I've seen some stuff, and I will never know what it's like to be a black guy. I will never know what it's like to live in those shoes, but I have peeked behind the veil because I have witnessed things that are downright wrong. And
Gotcha.
When wrong things happen, you have to be willing to step up and say that, like, hey, I don't think this is a good representation. So those clips aren't a good representation of Gamergate 2.0. They do not represent, in my opinion, what it means to try and make gaming a better space. And a lot of that is getting a lot of this bullshit out of the games, returning it to what it used to be, and just enjoying life as a form of escape and community.
Out of curiosity, if a black person were to come to you right now and tell you, and I say if because there's a lot of people in the chat who I know are black that are just spamming the chat right now. I get it. If they were to come to you and tell you this term is not racist, we do not believe it to be racist, stop being offended for us, would you still consider?
I'm not offended for anybody, because, like,
I'm just speaking what they're saying in the chat.
Yeah, that'd be fine if they wanted. If they wanted to, they don't.
Would you still consider the term racist?
I still consider the term, especially in the context that has been displayed. So yes, I still consider that. They're welcome to have another interpretation of it. I'm not telling them how to think, feel, or react to it, but I'm telling you how I think and feel about it. And that's how I think and feel about it.
Okay. So ultimately, I guess my final thing is, well, let's read this. I want to make sure we read all of it. Sorry, I don't want to skip nothing. I don't want to clip you out of context. Imagine a scenario where he's being told one thing, and this clip doesn't exist. And the only thing he found online was people. Are you talking about Abu Bakr here, by the way?
Yeah. So like imagine the scenario where like, because I would venture to bet that this is something that's going to be shown to him, and it's going to be something that reinforces the stereotype that he has of the opposing side, right? Like that is what I'm kind of getting at. Go ahead.
Okay, so the only thing he found, okay, bummer the game failed. I didn't want it because of X, Y, or Z reasons. At some point, the cognitive dissonance gets to be too much to where maybe he stops listening to these consultants telling him these things, assuming he wants to make another game. Final thought. Anyone who posts anything to the public is subject to public commenting back. I don't know what more about this dude beyond this clip. Perhaps he's being very antagonistic about it, and people could argue that he deserves it. But that all comes back to having a little class. And when the other team is injured, you take a knee, you don't spit in their eye. So I understand where you're trying to come from. And again, a lot of the middle ground people are like this, and I totally get it. Like it's different philosophy, different mindsets about a handle opposition, if you even want to consider it to be opposition. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think at some point we need to sit here and realize that the opposition isn't exactly playing by any rules. Right? There's people out there. There's people out there that are absolutely willing, and you see it right now on Twitter.
Oh yeah,
they're willing to try to ruin lives. They're willing to try to take all the way from you, right? It's not like just people.
It feels like a 2-year-old tantrum. That's how that's the only mental math. And it's also, I also use religious terms because there is a very devout religious kind of, fundamentalism, extremism that I see applied. And it is something that, I condemn, and, like that. Yeah. Like I said, like, I think this is me being consistent.
You're condemning everything.
Not necessarily. I don't condemn a lot of things, but in terms of how people present and communicate, yeah, they are open, and they want to post it. They're like, where it's like when people talk about like, oh no, they somebody posted something, and then all of a sudden that got a lot of visibility, and then all of a sudden people started replying. It's like, and then people try to label that as harassment, and it's not harassment. That's just conversation. If you don't like it, move the thread and mute the thread and call it a day.
Right, but if that's the case, man, if people really had that mindset about, oh, it's just conversation, if you don't like it, mute the thread. Well, you could just say that about jokes too. Oh, it's just jokes. If you don't understand a joke, just move on and
just move
mute
on.
it. And but we didn't.
People review. Yeah, I agree. And I stand by that condemnation based off of what I saw and what I'm saying in our conversation. Right. Yeah.
So let me finish what I was saying.
I have that right to do so. Yeah.
No, you do. And again, chat, I want to make sure everybody understands. He has a full fucking right to do exactly what he's doing. I'm not trying to say that he cannot do what we see here on screen. You're absolutely allowed to do that. That's fine. It's just, it seems a little bit confusing when multiple topics are brought up, and I don't quite understand why the full condemnation. But again, that's perfectly fine. We can agree to disagree. That's okay. Mm-hmm. My ultimate thing, what I was trying to say before, is when it comes to the opposition, right? Whatever you want to call it, the opposition, they're not exactly playing by the rules, right? So they're not exactly playing Mr. Nice Guy. They're out here actively trying to ruin, lives in any way that they can. They will take literally anything that you say and try to literally get you demonetized, canceled, whatever. As we are currently experiencing right now, I don't give a fuck. They can keep trying. It's all good. But my thing is, if that's the case, I understand the whole be better argument. I get that. And like I said, a lot of middle ground people have that. But do we at least acknowledge that there is a time and place for different kinds of I don't really want to call it leadership, because I don't consider myself to be a leader necessarily, unless it's in a joking context. But yeah, do we agree that there is a different time and different place and for different kinds of I guess the way that we handle things, right? So if I'm more aggressive, you're more middle ground. Do we at least acknowledge that there is a time and place for maybe someone who's slightly more aggressive?
Oh yeah, I think so. Absolutely.